In this video, I'll demonstrate how to use the Radial Gradient tool in Adobe Lightroom CC. The Radial Gradient tool will allow you to add gradual transitions of colors or values from a center point going outward. So I'll use this image to make a transition in the center. This is a photo of a viewfinder of an old camera pointed at a lemon tree. I'd like to darken the background of the image and apply a radial gradient to the center. I'll begin with the Edit panel, applying a darker exposure to the entire photo, and depending upon your photo, you might not need to do this step. And then, back on the right-hand side, I'll click on the Radial Gradient icon. Its panel is very similar to the settings for the Linear Gradient panel. I'll start by lightening the exposure, sliding it to the right. You won't see any change until I click on the photo and drag to bring out this oval shape. Notice that the center of the circle is now lighter, fading out to a darker value. And then you can click and drag your mouse to change the size and shape of the oval, making it more or less circular. Hitting the O key on your keyboard for the overlay will bring up a red mask indicating the area that's being affected by the gradient. The red fades in a similar way as the gradient, more intense in the center and then fading out. Clicking on the blue pin, you can grab the shape and drag it somewhere else in the picture plane. And you can click on the outside line to resize and shape it as well. And if needed, you can hit the Delete or Backspace key to remove a gradient. So now I will place it where I would like it, and I'll adjust the sliders in the panel. You can add more variety of values by experimenting with sliders such as contrast, highlights, whites, and blacks. Next, I'll click on the eraser brush. I'll use the shortcut bracket keys on the keyboard to adjust the size of the brush, and I'll erase the gradient mask from the edges of the camera, making it more square. I'll use the icon in this bottom corner to show the original image versus the changes. And you can see that the darker values along the outside create greater contrast, and the radial gradient gives a vignette effect to the lemon tree. I'd like to show you one more example using multiple gradients. So in this image, I'll increase the exposure of the entire picture to show more details, but notice that I lose details outside the windows and the landscape becomes overexposed. So I'll open up the Radial Gradient panel and I'll apply a radial gradient over the center window and bring down the exposure. I'll also go over to the panel and show you the feather slider, which will harden or soften the outer edge of your mask. And for this particular image, I'll also go to the panel and bring up clarity and dehaze. Then I'll switch over to the eraser brush and I'll use it to remove the mask on the sky and the water. A great thing about the Radial Gradient tool is that you can duplicate the settings and paste it over other parts of the photo. With the visibility of the overlay turned on, right-click on the blue pin and choose Duplicate. Now there are two radial gradients on top of one another. So click on one and drag it away to place it over another location. The radial gradient is great at creating multiple vignettes that don't have to be in the center of the picture. I'll right-click on this pin and make another copy for the other window. Using the eraser brush to remove the mask on the pillars, I feel like the coverage of my brush is a bit weak. I'll click on the arrow in this panel to see additional brush options, and I'll increase the flow to erase the area more effectively. I'll do the same for the other gradients. When you have multiple gradients, use the O key to make sure you have the correct one selected. The eraser brush won't erase over multiple gradients at the same time. And now you can see a variety of values and details inside the building, and you can see the landscape outside the windows. I'll export this image, saving it to the Creative Cloud in the folder for this unit. And that is how to use the Radial Gradient tool to add gradual transitions and vignettes to your photos in Adobe Lightroom CC.